Beaches have always instilled a sense of dread in me, a fear that roots itself in an unforgettable childhood experience. As a kid, I eagerly anticipated summer weekends spent at our beach house, or if I was lucky, at my friend Charles' beach house in Long Beach Island. It was the summer when I was 6, and excitement bubbled in the air as Charles, our mutual friend, Riley, and I prepared for a weekend of unsupervisioned fun at Charles' place. Riley, who had just gotten his driver's license, was in the driver's seat, and his unsteady driving made for a hilarious ride down. We laughed uncontrollably as we swerved and cursed at the road, making the trip feel quick and exhilarating. Once we arrived, we rushed to unpack our things in the cozy beach house. Taking note of the layout, the house had a front door, a garage door, and a back sliding door leading to a deck that connected to the upstairs bedrooms. Most importantly, the back faced a narrow lagoon, offering us a perfect view of the dark waters. The three of us were at the age where chasing girls consumed our thoughts. With a beach house all to ourselves, we couldn't resist the urge to invite some girls over. After some messaging, we managed to convince 3 cute girls, Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie, to come hang out with us. We had stocked up on enough alcohol, pilfered from our parents to fuel our wild weekend. As the night unfolded, we all jumped into Charles' small backyard pool, the steam rising and the gentle breeze mixing with the sweet smell of smoke from our joints. We were blissfully carefree until Charles suddenly turned the music down, his eyes fixed on something in the darkness across the lagoon. Confused, I turned to see what had captured his attention, but the shadows obscured any details. "Why do you turn it down?" one of the girls asked. Charles whispered that he saw someone standing on the dock across the way. I laughed it off, thinking he was just trying to scare us. After all, people lived there. But Charles insisted. "I know that family. They're supposed to be in Florida." A chill crept up my spine, but I brushed it aside, dismissing the unease. The girls, however, seemed unnerved, and when they expressed a desire to go inside, I was ready to agree. We climbed out of the pool and started drying off. But then Riley suddenly jumped, his face pale. "Look!" he exclaimed, pointing towards the lagoon. We all turned to see movement at the dock, and as a car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminated the horrifying sight. There were 4 tall figures standing at the edge of the dock, their shapes indistinct but menacing, and they were definitely facing us. "Come on, everybody, get inside!" Charles shouted, his voice trembling. Panic surged as we rushed into the house. The tension thickened the air. Just then, we heard a series of splashes echoing behind us. They were swimming across the lagoon, and that's when pure terror took hold of us. The girls screamed as Riley slammed the sliding door shut and locked it, while Charles hurried to secure the front door. We scrambled to hide in a room out of sight, our hearts pounding in silence, waiting for the next sound to reveal what was happening outside. Moments stretched into eternity until Riley suddenly cursed, realizing he had forgotten to lock the sliding door on the deck. Charles' eyes widened in horror as he grasped the reality of our vulnerability. Just then, we heard a soft, unnerving sound of footsteps above us. That was it. The fear kicked into overdrive. With no weapons and fueled by adrenaline, we sprinted for the front door. Bursting into the night, Riley scrambled to start a car, his nerves making him reckless, as he smashed into Charles' mailbox while fleeing. Once we were far enough away, we called the police, the chaos still fresh in our minds. When the authorities arrived and searched the house, we discovered the shocking truth. Some items from the top floor had vanished, but that wasn't even the worst part. Charles' family boat, a medium-sized Boston whaler, had also been stolen, most probably used as a getaway vehicle. The police speculated that the thieves had used a spare set of keys Charles' father kept hidden under the steering wheel. As we processed the horror of the night, the nagging question remained: how did he know where the key was? The police were unable to catch the culprits, leaving us haunted by the idea that the robbers might have known Charles' family personally. It's been years since that terrifying event, but literally, guys, not a day goes by that I don't double-check every lock in my home. Trust me, you should do the same. Lock your doors at night, cause you never know who might be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I have been a trucker for nearly 15 years, and what happened to me in 2017 is an experience I'll never forget. I was making an overnight haul through the Mojave Desert in California, heading to a destination in Arizona, delivering appliances, or at least that's what I think I was doing. It was pitch black, with darkness stretching in every direction, and my Semi's headlights were dim and flickering. I had been menacing to get them fixed, but I'd put it off for too long, with hardly any other cars on the road. The poor visibility made me squint to see the road ahead. As the hour dragged on, I contemplated pulling over to wait for dawn, but the thought of losing precious time, money I desperately needed, kept me going. The road ahead was straight shot, so I convinced myself it would be fine. About an hour before sunrise, something caught my eye in the distance, an approaching light that seemed to be moving quickly. I panicked and I slammed on the brakes, my truck screeching on a halt just a foot from a car parked in the middle of the road. Its hazard lights blinked ominously, and the passenger door hung wide open. Curiosity piqued, and I carefully reversed and pulled over. I thought maybe someone needed to jump or was in some kind of trouble. As I got out, I noticed how still the night was. No wind, no sounds, just that faint clicking of the hazard lights cutting through the eerie silence. The car was a shiny red Ford Fusion, and I approached cautiously. To my shock, when I peeked inside, it was completely empty. I checked the back seat, the front, and there was no sign of anyone. Unease settled in my stomach, and I felt as if eyes were watching me from the shadows of the desert. I glanced around nervously, scanning the dark for any signs of life, but the only thing illuminated was my truck's headlights, cast in long shadows. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate further. I looked in the car again, and everything seemed normal. The keys were in the ignition, but the engine was off. I approached the trunk, hoping to find some answers. It was locked, but I grabbed the keys and managed to unlock it. To my dismay, the trunk wouldn't open. It was jammed from the inside. I tried to access it through the back seat, and to my surprise, it opened easily. As I reached inside, I noticed 3 squishy garbage bags and a length of rope binding the truck shut. Just as I leaned closer, the loudest gunshot I'd ever heard rang out, reverberating through the night. Panic shot through me, and I slammed my head on the car roof in shock. I tossed the keys into the front seat and scrambled back to my truck. That's when I heard a gravelly voice yelling in the distance, calling out repeatedly. Then as the voice was there, it grew closer and closer. As time was passing and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I jumped into the cab of my semi and I turned the ignition. My heart raced as I threw it into gear, my hands shaking as the engine coughed to life. I caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the trunk of the car, a short, stocky guy with wild red hair, wearing overalls and high boots, and on hand he gripped a small shovel and in the other an old hunting rifle. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and his expression was a mixture of worry and urgency. As I drove past him, he dropped the shovel and waved his arms, shouting for me to wait, but there was no way I was sticking around. I slammed on the gas, my truck lurching forward, heart pounding as I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man sprinted after my truck for a few seconds before veering back to his car, clearly desperate for me to stop, but I was not about to oblige. I sped down the road, pushing the semi faster than I should have. After a few minutes, I thought I was in the clear until I spotted the headlights rapidly approaching behind me. My heart sank as the realization set in. He was on my tail. I frantically dialed 911, relaying the details as best as I could. The car behind me began honking madly, the sound piercing the stillness of the desert night. I kept driving, praying he wouldn't try to ram me off the road. After what felt like an eternity of him right in my bumper, he suddenly cut in front of me, slamming on his brakes. I nearly crashed into him when out of nowhere flashing police lights appeared ahead. The man swerved off to the right, disappearing into the darkness of the desert. Relief washed over me as I pulled over, waiting for the officer to arrive. I breathlessly recounted the bizarre encounter, but instead of chasing the guy down, the officer decided to take my statement. I was infuriated. Didn't he realize that this guy might be still out there? I urged him to leave immediately, insisting the suspect was getting away, but the cop brushed me off. assured me they'd conduct a thorough search once backup arrived. I drove away, but they never called with any updates. Since then, I told the story countless times, and while some friends think the guy was burying bodies, I find it hard to believe. He had a small shovel, and those bags seemed too tiny for anything sinister. For my own peace of mind, I tell myself he was probably just putting a sick animal to rest. But the truth is, I've never felt comfortable driving through deserts at night again. The haunting memory lingers, and the darkness out there feels alive, filled with secrets best left buried. I'm sure you've come across those trendy videos where truckers share their daily routines and helpful tips. Well, as a younger guy in this industry, I see them all the time on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. I had to drop out of a prestigious university for personal reasons, and people often tell me I could have been so much more than just a trucker. But honestly, I've been on this road for over 2 years now, and it's not a big gig. The only real challenge is the long hours. You never truly grasp how isolation can gnaw at your mind until you experience it firsthand. My advice, make peace with your inner demons because they will haunt you during those lonely stretches. Believe me, I learned that the hard way. This particular incident happened just 3 months after I landed my first trucking job. I was still as green as they come, making a long drive from southern New Jersey to Lafayette, Indiana. A grueling 12-hour trek. It might not sound too crazy, but consider that I had just finished an 8-hour drive, and you'll see why I was feeling the strain. Determined to get my deliveries done as quickly as possible, I decided to drive through the night, aiming to arrive in Lafayette just before 3 a.m. For a while, things went smoothly. The roads were particularly empty, allowing me to push the semi a little faster than usual. But halfway into the drive, I reached for a can of Red Bull from the center console, only to realize I had forgotten to restock my supplies after the last delivery. I slammed my hand against the dashboard in frustration. Stopping to grab an energy drink was the last thing I wanted to do. The idea of falling asleep behind the wheel was equally terrifying. Reluctantly, I pulled into the first service area I spotted. What I found wasn't a service stop, but an abandoned gas station that had been turned into a rundown convenience store. Not exactly what I was hoping for. I figured I'd check it out anyway, and it was a total bust. I'd head to a nearby store I had spotted on the way. As I parked the truck and stepped inside, I was greeted by darkness. Every light was off, and the place was eerily quiet. I have expected the door to be locked, but to my surprise, it swung open. My heart raced as I scanned the room, hoping against hope that I'd find at least a drink or some snacks left behind. Just as I was about to turn back, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I noticed a faint glow coming from a door at the back of the store. My curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly opened it. To my shock, I found the refrigerator plugged into the wall. I hurried over and yanked the door open, only to discover it was completely empty, shelves stripped bare, as if someone had gutted the whole appliance. As I was shutting the door, I thought I heard a clatter from the main room, a noise that sent chills down my spine. I froze, listening intently. Was it just my imagination? Cautiously, I stepped back into the main area, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Nothing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, urging me to leave. I had no time for this nonsense. I hurried out of the store as my heart was racing and jogged to the nearby convenience shop that was thankfully open. After grabbing a drink, I dashed back to my truck, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. But as I took that one last look at the abandoned store, my stomach immediately dropped. The door was now ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. I was sure I had just shut it behind me. Dread settled in. I needed to get back on the road and shake off this unsettling feeling. As I emerged back onto the highway, the caffeine kicked in, jolting me from my fatigue. I tried to push the bizarre encounter out of my mind, but the image of that empty refrigerator kept creeping back in. Just then, I noticed strange movements in the curtain behind me, a bellowing that sent a jolt of panic through my veins. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I watched the curtain shift. Even though I hadn't turned on the air conditioning, my heart raced. Was someone in my truck? I didn't have any weapons, so I quickly typed the nearest police station into my phone. The drive to the station felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I imagined whoever was in my truck reaching out to grab me, or worse, trying to take control of the vehicle. When I finally arrived, I parked as close as I could and bolted towards the police station. In mere seconds, my truck was surrounded by officers. As I opened the bag, what I saw will haunt me forever. 3 homeless individuals emerged, 2 men and a woman, all looking disheveled and wrapped in filthy blankets. One of the men brandished 2 switchblades, while the others glared at me with menacing stares, refusing to utter a word. As they were cuffed and led away, I was left with more questions than answers. What did they want, and what had they planned? The encounter lingered in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unpredictability of the road. I didn't stick around to find out. I just wanted to escape that crazy nightmare, and that's all.